The Call and First Contact. The luminary colony on Epsilon Tauri IV had been considered one of the brightest jewels in the Galactic Confederation's territorial crown. Established 2 cycles ago, it represented everything the Confederation aspired to: a harmonious blend of advanced technology and natural preservation, where the crystalline structures of the luminary perfectly complemented the sweeping azure plains of their new home. Commander Vala Therost stood at the command center's view screen, her translucent skin pulsing with deep crimson alarm patterns as she watched the attack unfold. The Mordrex ships had appeared without warning, 15 assault vessels that immediately began methodically destroying the orbital defense platforms. Status of evacuation protocols, she demanded, her voice maintaining its melodic quality despite the urgency. Civilian shelters at 63% capacity, reported Sub-Commander Elio. Security forces are deploying to defensive positions, but his voice trailed off. Vala needed no elaboration. The luminary were scientists and architects, not warriors. Their security forces were equipped to handle civil disturbances, not a full-scale assault from the Mordrex, biological harvesters known throughout the galaxy for their brutality and the grotesque improvements they made to their own physiology using genetic material forcibly extracted from other species. The quantum beacon, Vala stated firmly. We must use it. The control room fell silent. Chief Science Officer Nerine stepped forward, her light patterns shifting to concerned violet. Commander, the Confederation expressly prohibits its use except in circumstances of extreme peril where conventional distress signals would be insufficient. Vala finished. Look outside, Nerine. I believe this qualifies. The quantum beacon was one of the most closely guarded technologies in the Confederation. Unlike conventional communications that propagated at light speed, quantum entanglement allowed instantaneous contact across any distance, but its energy signature was distinctive and could reveal the locations of secret Confederation outposts. Activated, Vala ordered. Nerine hesitated only a moment before moving to a secured console. She placed her palm against a crystalline device that pulsed with soft blue light. This is Chief Science Officer Nerine of the Luminary Colony on Epsilon Tauri IV. We are under heavy assault by Mordrex forces, 15 vessels, orbital defenses failing. Civilian population at imminent risk, requesting immediate assistance from any Confederation vessels in range. The crystal flashed once, then resumed its steady pulsing. The message would propagate instantly across the galaxy, reaching every quantum receiver simultaneously. Now we wait, Vala said softly. The waiting didn't last long. Within minutes, the first Mordrex landing craft breached the atmosphere, descending toward the main settlement areas. Ground-based defense systems activated automatically, filling the sky with pulses of energy that mostly dissipated harmlessly against the Mordrex shields. Across the galaxy in the vast orbital complex that served as the Galactic Confederation's administrative headquarters, the quantum beacon's signal arrived with a priority alert that interrupted an ongoing assembly. Representatives from dozens of species looked up as the message from Epsilon Tauri IV played throughout the chamber. Ambassador Zivex, a tall, willowy figure of the peaceful Aetherian species, was the first to speak. We must dispatch aid immediately. A hulking representative of the militaristic Kroval species rumbled in disagreement. The nearest battle group would take 3 days to reach Epsilon Tauri. By then, the colony will be stripped clean. We would be risking ships and lives for nothing. So we abandoned them. Zyvex demanded, bioluminescent markings flashing with emotion. We make strategic decisions, the Kroval replied coldly. Epsilon Tauri IV is a frontier colony. Regrettable, but not worth compromising Confederation fleet positioning. Similar debates erupted throughout the chamber as species aligned based on their own interests and alliances. Some called for immediate action, others for caution, and still others, particularly those with historical grievances against the luminary, for complete non-intervention. Admiral Jorax, the Confederation fleet commander, finally brought order to the chaos. I have already ordered a rapid response team to prepare for departure. They can reach Epsilon Tauri IV in just under 3 days. However, I must be realistic. That may not be soon enough to save the colony. Back on Epsilon Tauri IV, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The last orbital platform fell within the hour, and Mordrek's landing craft touched down in a coordinated pattern surrounding the main settlement. The luminary security forces, barely 300 trained personnel, created defensive perimeters around the civilian shelters. They were armed primarily with standard-issue pulse rifles and a few portable shield generators, pitifully inadequate against Mordrek's combat technology. The first Mordrek's ground forces they encountered were even more terrifying than the briefing recordings had suggested. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, their exoskeletal armor seemed partially fused with their bodies. Multiple limbs wielded advanced weapons, while sensory appendages swiveled constantly, seeking prey. They moved with horrifying speed and precision. The defenders' first volley of pulse fire was largely absorbed by Mordrek's personal shields. Return fire cut down a dozen luminary security officers in seconds. Vala ordered a tactical retreat, using the colony's structures as cover. Throughout the main settlement, scenes of horror unfolded as Mordrek's troops methodically advanced. They weren't simply killing, they were capturing. Specialized units wielded devices that immobilized luminary civilians, who were then dragged to collection points for transport to the Mordrek ships. In the command center, Nerine led a team of engineers attempting to restore communications compromised by Mordrek's jamming. If we can reconfigure the weather monitoring satellites, we might be able to bounce signals through their network, she explained, hands flying over the controls. A young engineer looked up from his station. Chief Nerine, sensors show the Mordreks are gathering civilians, but they're also collecting samples from our biotechnology labs and gene banks. That confirms our intelligence, Nerine said grimly. They don't just want our resources, they want our biological innovations. As night fell over the colony, the defenders were pushed back to their final perimeters. Nearly 40% of the population had been captured, with the remainder huddled in the deepest shelters beneath the central administrative complex where Vala and her remaining officers continued their desperate resistance. Confederation response time, Vala asked, though she already knew the answer. Still almost 3 days away, Elio replied, his luminescence dimmed with exhaustion. Vala was about to respond when a communications officer suddenly straightened. Commander, we're detecting a new signal. It's not Confederation standard, and it's not Mordrek's. Origin, Vala demanded. Unknown. It just appeared at the edge of our sensor range. Single vessel. Moving at. That can't be right. Report, officer. It's moving at nearly 3 times the speed of any Confederation vessel I've ever recorded. Vector brings it directly to our position in approximately 17 minutes. Confusion rippled through the command center. No known species possessed such technology. Even the Mordreks, with all their biological adaptations and stolen technology, couldn't achieve such velocities. On the tactical display, they watched as the Mordreks detected the approaching vessel. 2 of their cruisers broke formation to intercept. What happened next would forever change the galaxy's understanding of warfare. The unknown vessel, still too distant to be visually identified, released what appeared to be small projectiles toward the approaching Mordrek ships. The Mordreks, clearly expecting these to be conventional torpedoes, activated their point defense systems. The projectiles, however, didn't behave like torpedoes. They accelerated, altered course with impossible precision, and then, most shocking of all, split into multiple smaller projectiles just before impact. The Mordrek shields, designed to repel energy weapons, proved ineffective against these kinetic weapons. Within moments, both cruisers suffered catastrophic hull breaches. What species possesses such technology? Nerine whispered, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. The answer came 13 minutes later when the vessel entered orbit and made direct communication contact. The voice that came through was unlike any species they'd encountered, deep, but with unusual inflections. Epsilon Tauri IV Colony. This is Captain James Chen of the Terran vessel Retribution. We received your distress call and are here to render assistance. Please advise on your current situation. A stunned silence fell over the command center. Terran. Elio finally spoke. I've never heard of this species. Nor I, said Nareen. And how did they receive our quantum beacon? That technology is restricted to Confederation members. Vala, however, had gone completely still, her luminescence patterns frozen in a pattern that among the luminary denoted profound shock. Humans, she whispered. They're humans, humans. Elio echoed. From the quarantine zone. That's impossible. They're a restricted pre-FTL species. The Confederation cordoned their entire system centuries ago. Apparently, Vala replied slowly, that assessment was incorrect. She activated the communication channel. Terran vessel Retribution, this is Commander Vala Theros. We are under attack by Mordrex forces. Our defenses are overwhelmed, and approximately 40% of our population has been captured for biological harvesting. Any assistance you can provide would be. Understood, Commander, the human interrupted. We're deploying ground teams now. Please share your tactical data so we can coordinate. Our priority is neutralizing the Mordrex vessels and recovering your captured people. The tactical display updated to show multiple smaller craft launching from the human vessel. Unlike the methodical, formation-based deployment typical of Confederation forces, these craft moved with seemingly erratic patterns, unpredictable, making them difficult targets for Mordrex weapons. What happens now? Nareen asked quietly. Vala's luminescence had shifted to a pattern rarely seen among the luminary, a color that signified both hope and uncertainty. Now, she replied, we discover what the Confederation has been hiding about humans. As the first human craft landed near the command center, the luminary caught their first glimpse of their unlikely saviors. Bipedal, clad in armor that appeared primitive compared to Confederation standards, but moved with a fluid grace that suggested extensive combat experience. As the Mordrex launched a coordinated attack against this new threat, the entire colony watched in astonishment as the humans didn't retreat or take defensive positions. Instead, they advanced. The revelation and aftermath. The luminary security forces watched in stunned silence as the humans engaged the Mordrex directly. Unlike Confederation tactical doctrine, which emphasized coordinated energy weapon volleys from defensive positions, the humans employed what appeared to be chaotic, individualistic combat methods. They moved constantly, using terrain and buildings for cover, communicating through short bursts of encrypted transmissions. Most shocking of all were their weapons. While the Confederation had long ago standardized on energy-based weaponry, elegant, precise, and considered the pinnacle of civilized warfare, these humans wielded an array of kinetic projectile weapons, explosives, and close combat tools that seemed brutally primitive yet devastatingly effective. Their armor, Nareen observed from the command center where they monitored the battle. It's absorbing energy weapon impacts better than our defensive shields. Vala nodded, and noticed their combat formation, or rather, lack thereof. Each human appears to operate semi-independently, while still coordinating with the larger unit. Across the settlement, the remaining Mordrex forces found themselves in an unprecedented situation. Evolved from apex predators and enhanced with countless biological adaptations stolen from subjugated species, they had rarely encountered serious resistance. Their standard tactics, overwhelming force, terror, and technological superiority, had always been sufficient. Against the humans, these advantages evaporated. A particularly illuminating moment came when a group of Mordrex warriors cornered 3 humans in what should have been a decisive engagement. The Mordrex commander, an 8-limbed monstrosity whose body had been augmented with harvested neural tissue from a dozen species, approached confidently with energy weapons charge. What happened next would be analyzed in Confederation tactical academies for generations. Instead of surrendering or attempting to break through using force, One human threw a small device that erupted in blinding light and deafening sound, overwhelming even the enhanced senses of the Mordrex. In the 3 seconds of confusion that followed, the humans eliminated the entire Mordrex squad with precision shots to vulnerable junction points in their exoskeletons, weaknesses that the Confederation had documented but never successfully exploited in combat. Above the planet, the situation was equally transformative. The human vessel, relatively small compared to Confederation capital ships, demonstrated weapons technology that defied conventional understanding. Rather than the standard energy-based weaponry, they deployed what appeared to be mass accelerator technology that propelled physical projectiles at relativistic speeds, bypassing shield systems designed to diffuse energy attacks. Within 2 hours, the tide had turned. The Mordrex, faced with an enemy they couldn't predict or counter effectively, began a disorganized retreat. 3 of their vessels attempted to escape with captured luminary, but the human ship intercepted them with surgical precision, disabling their engines without harming the sections where captives were held. In the command center, Commander Vala received a transmission from the human captain requesting a meeting. When Captain Chen arrived, the contrast between human and luminary physiology became starkly apparent. Where the luminary were tall, slender beings with translucent skin that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, the human was compact, densely muscled, with opaque skin and expressive facial features that seemed to communicate without the need for bioluminescence. "Your timely intervention saved our colony, Captain," Vala began formally. "The luminary are indebted to humanity." Captain Chen's expression shifted in what the luminary would later learn was a smile. "We responded to a distress call, Commander. Any decent spacefaring civilization would do the same." Yet the Confederation didn't, Nareen observed. "Their nearest forces are still 2 days away." "That's one reason we maintain patrol vessels near Confederation space," Chen replied. "We found your government's response times inadequate." The implications of this statement sent ripples of shock through the command center. Humans had been monitoring Confederation space without detection. "There are several matters we should discuss," Vala said carefully, beginning with how a supposedly pre-FTL species quarantined within their home system has advanced technology that exceeds Confederation standards. Chen's expression hardened slightly. "That quarantine was not of our making, Commander. It was imposed without our consent or knowledge nearly 3 centuries ago, when your Confederation discovered Earth during its initial expansion phase. But our historical records indicate humans were primitive, barely achieving spaceflight within their own system." Elio interjected. "Your records," Chen replied, "reflect what your government wanted recorded. The truth is considerably different." Over the next hour, Captain Chen revealed a history that contradicted everything the Confederation had taught its member species. Humans had not been a primitive species needing protection. They had been a potential rival. When first contact occurred, humanity had already developed early FTL technology independently, following a completely different technological path than the Confederation standard. The Confederation leadership, concerned about a species that evolved on a high-gravity, high-radiation death world and displayed alarming adaptability and aggression, made a fateful decision. Rather than invite humanity to join or risk open conflict, they established a quarantine zone around Sol, using advanced technology to create the illusion that the system was isolated and humans unaware of the broader galactic community. But clearly, Vala observed, the quarantine failed. "It was effective for about 70 years, Chen acknowledged, until one of your science vessels experienced a catastrophic drive failure near the edge of our system. We rescued the crew and, in the process, learned the truth. And rather than announcing yourselves to the Confederation," Nareen began, "we decided a more cautious approach was warranted," Chen finished. "We reversed engineered the technologies we could from the damaged vessel, combined them with our own development paths, and began a careful expansion beyond the quarantine zone, staying hidden, observing, learning." "How extensive is human territory now?" Vala asked quietly. Chen's expression remained neutral. Sufficient. The conversation was interrupted by a priority communication from the Confederation fleet. Admiral Jorax himself appeared on the view screen, his scaled features rigid with what passed for shock among his species. "Commander Theros," he began, "our long-range sensors detect the Mordrex fleet in retreat and an unknown vessel in orbit around your colony. Please advise on your status immediately." Vala exchanged a glance with Captain Chen before responding. "Admiral, the situation has been resolved. We were assisted by a previously unknown species calling themselves humans." The Admiral's reaction was immediate and alarming. His scales flattened against his skull, a sign of extreme distress among his kind. "Humans? Commander, maintain minimal contact and await our arrival. Do not share any technology or sensitive information. This is a first contact situation of the highest protocol level." "With respect, Admiral," Vala replied, "this doesn't appear to be a first contact situation at all. The humans seem quite familiar with the Confederation, including our quantum beacon technology." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "I'm implementing Security Protocol Omega-7. All records of this incident are hereby classified. We will arrive within 47 hours. Maintain your position and limit all communication with the human vessel." When the transmission ended, an uncomfortable silence filled the command center. Finally, Captain Chen spoke. "And now you understand why we chose to remain hidden. Your leadership has been lying to your people for centuries about our existence. Why reveal yourselves now?" Narine asked. "Because the equation has changed," Chen replied simply. "The Mordrex have been expanding aggressively for the past decade. Several of their harvesting expeditions have approached human territory. We've been tracking them, assessing their capabilities, and determined they represent a threat to stability in this sector. And the Confederation has been slow to respond," Vala concluded. "Precisely. When we intercepted your quantum beacon signal, we saw an opportunity to both save your people and send a message, both to the Mordrex and to your Confederation leadership." "What message is that?" Elio asked. "That humanity is no longer content to remain in the shadows. That the quarantine your leaders imposed was their choice, not ours. And that unlike your Confederation, when we hear a distress call, we respond with everything we have." In the days that followed, as the Confederation fleet arrived and diplomatic chaos ensued, the luminary colonists found themselves at the center of a galactic paradigm shift. The humans departed before the Confederation ships arrived, but not before providing the colony with defensive technology that would prevent any future Mordrex attacks. Technology they specifically requested not be shared with Confederation authorities. When questioned by Confederation investigators about the human intervention, Vala made a decision that would change her people's future. She provided the complete, unedited records of the human action against the Mordrex and their subsequent revelations about the quarantine. They could have remained hidden. She testified before the Confederation Security Council 3 weeks later. Instead, they chose to save our people at risk to themselves. Does that sound like the dangerous species your predecessors deemed necessary to quarantine? The political fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Multiple member species demanded investigations into the original quarantine decision. Others expressed alarm at the advanced technology humans had developed independently. Some called for immediate diplomatic outreach, while others advocated for strengthened defenses against potential human aggression. Amid the chaos, one thing became increasingly clear. Humanity was no longer a footnote in galactic history or a primitive curiosity to be studied from afar. They had emerged as a fully formed power with technology that in some areas exceeded Confederation standards, a different approach to warfare that had proven devastatingly effective against a common enemy, and a philosophical position that valued direct action over political deliberation. 6 months after the Epsilon Tauri IV incident, as it came to be known, the first official Confederation diplomatic delegation departed for human space, following coordinates provided through channels established by Captain Chen. Their mission was simple yet profound: to begin formal relations with a species that had been observing them for centuries. As the delegation departed, Admiral Jorax pulled Vala aside. Now promoted to diplomatic liaison due to her experience with humans, she would be accompanying the mission. "What do you think we'll find?" the Admiral asked quietly. "Are they friends or a threat?" Vala's luminescence shifted to a complex pattern that conveyed both optimism and caution. "I believe they're exactly what the galaxy needs right now, Admiral. A reminder that different evolutionary paths can lead to different solutions. The Confederation has grown complacent, rigid in its thinking. The humans challenge those assumptions." "You admire them," he observed. "I respect what they did for my people when the Confederation couldn't arrive in time," she corrected. "More importantly, I'm curious about what we might learn from each other moving forward." As the diplomatic vessel prepared to depart, Vala reflected on the message Captain Chen had left her with. "For centuries, your people believed you were the teachers, and we were the students to be contained until ready. Perhaps the truth is we have much to teach each other, if your leadership is willing to listen." The distress call that had been meant to save a single colony had instead sparked a transformation that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The species that had been hidden away, quarantined out of fear and political expedience, had emerged not as the primitives of Confederation legend, but as equals with their own unique perspective on the cosmos. And as the first official human delegation prepared to receive the Confederation representatives, the message they transmitted ahead contained just 5 words that perfectly encapsulated their emergence onto the galactic stage. "We've been expecting you. Welcome, neighbors."